what are some of the things that you teach that's a little bit different than others that kind of makes you stand out for
Yeah.
most?
So I think that most personal financial advice or personal financial content focuses on spending as little as possible. And while just like I said, it's important to spend less than you make. Like that's always important. But I think that's too simplistic of a decision making. And I think it makes people really miserable. And sometimes I think that can cause people to like go on binges and overdo it when they actually do spend money. I'm much more of a proponent of, yes, spend your money and enjoy your money. You work hard, you should have a portion of your income or a portion of your assets that you allow yourself to really just have fun and you give yourself free reign. And this is about more being clear on what those things are.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. I have Anna N'Jie Konte. I'm going to say that again. I have Anna N'Jie Konte on the call. Super pumped to have her be able to share her story and her insights on today's podcast. But before we do, I want to give you guys a free training that has helped so many of my students. And for you too, as you guys are building an online influence and you're trying to look at how do I implement building that influence through sales and marketing, I have a full direct training down below, free for you. I want to help support you on your journey there. And Anna, as we jump into our podcast here to kind of understand who you are, what you're about, you have tons of cool stuff. You're a podcast host. You have your own business doing wealth management. You help, with people with inheritance and divorce and all sorts of different things, navigating all sorts of journeys with that. You're a mother of 3 kids. You have your hands full. And so asking you this question that I ask everybody is, what is high performance? What does that look to you? Because there's different levels of achievement that you've been able to accomplish over the years as a NBA, you're a certified financial planner. Like you have a lot of digits at the end of your name for proof of acceleration. But what is high performance? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think high performance is really about having a very clear set of priorities and making sure that you're excellent at that, right? I always say that I don't try and do everything. I think it's a fool's errand to try and do everything and just be, everywhere at once. I have 3, 4 things maximum that I focus on, more like 3, and I go really hard with that and I prioritize that and I make sure I'm the best I can possibly be at those. And then the rest of it, maybe it'll be in the future. Maybe I'll never prioritize it, but I don't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Tell us a little bit about like your story here of like who
Yeah.
you serve, how you serve them, so that our audience here can really get a good glimpse of who they're listening to here.
Yeah. So I'm the CEO and founder of Bodead Wealth Advisors, which is an independent wealth management firm. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I have clients all over the country. And most of my clients are, women in their 30s and 40s that have built businesses or have, been really successful in their career. They've reached that sort of mid-career level, middle management, maybe even director level in their company. And they want someone to help them be a financial thought partner as they're navigating a lot of big transitions in life. So that may be, becoming mothers, that may be getting married, it may be getting divorced. At this point, a lot of times they're inheriting money. And so they have suddenly a lot more wealth than they thought of. And they have all of these decisions to make. And they want to make sure that they're being as intentional and as thoughtful as possible. I work a lot with people that are also really impact and values aligned and values oriented. So they want to make sure like, hey, I want to feel really comfortable with the people I spend my money with, that I'm giving enough because I've been really fortunate in life and that their investments are in alignment with their personal values. So we do a lot of work on that too.
Amazing, amazing. So tell us a little bit. You were telling me before the recording here, your dad came from the Congo, your mom was from Puerto Rico. Today that we're filming this is really helpful because it's, Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about like the roots here that inspired your growth
Yeah.
with everything here.
Yeah. So my dad's actually from Gambia. lots
Gambia.
of countries in Africa, but
Gambia.
yes, from Gambia. But it's a tiny one that most people have never heard of. There's like 2 million people in the whole country. So super, super small. I grew up, I think, like a lot of, so I was born and raised in New York City. Both of my parents are immigrants to this country. And I grew up with a really strong sense of my culture and my identity. My parents and my grandmother and my aunts and uncles were so focused on making sure that I had a really strong sense of self. And with that was also a really strong value system. So I remember, being a kid and my dad telling me, every time you walk out of this door, you have to remember that you represent our family. So the way you behave when you walk out of this door is a reflection on me, a reflection on your mom, a reflection on everybody that has your last name. And so you need to be really mindful of that, because even if none of us know about it, you know about it. We talked a lot about cultural values and, being really community minded and being really family oriented. I grew up in a way where we didn't have much financial resources, but I was so surrounded by love and support that I knew, nothing would ever, even if things got really hard, I'd always be okay, because there'd always be somebody in my family who was looking out for me, who cared about me, and would make sure that me and my sisters and, my mom were okay. And that was such a gift. And I think it instilled a lot, like a really rock solid sense of identity in me, and also an understanding of the things that I do and the way that I show up in the world really matter. And so
Yeah.
to be mindful of that.
What got you into the wealth sector? I feel like
Oh,
there's some hidden story back here that define
totally.
kind of how you perceive wealth. Because now you help people with not
Yeah.
only building it, but retaining it, and really
Yeah.
kind of having a financial game plan. Like, now that you're successful in your own right, what was the beginning story there that got you into
Yeah.
start thinking about numbers and math and wealth
Yeah.
creation?
So I was just saying I was really rich in love and experience and
Yeah.
cultural like enmeshment growing up, but what we were not rich in was money.
Mm.
So my parents worked 2 or 3 jobs my entire childhood. It was just we're trying really hard to make the American dream happen, and there was no concept of wealth management because there wasn't really wealth to manage. If somebody was able to make the bills at the end of the month, like that was financial success. If
Mm.
someone was able to buy a house, that was financial success. I ended up in wealth management because I got a random call from a recruiter after college that said, I think you'd be really great for this assistant role at a wealth management firm. I interviewed, I got hired, and that was the beginning of this career for me, where I've been doing this for 14 years now. And funnily enough, it was not what I thought at all where I would end up, but it was exactly what I needed because, from a very young age, I recognized a lot of the financial struggles that we went through as a family. And I knew that I didn't want to continue that. Like, that was never going to be me. I was not going to continue that way. But at the same time, I didn't necessarily know which way to go.
Mm.
And that first job opened the door for me to gain the skills that changed my financial life and allowed me to become a wealthy person and to have a level of financial stability that nobody in my family has, even to this day. And because of that experience and that trajectory, and even just that disparity of what I've done compared to my upbringing, that's really made me passionate about working with women in particular, because it was the women in my family who, my grandmother was a widow. My grandfather died the week my mom was born. So my grandmother had not even a high school education and 2 little kids. She emigrated to the US with my mom and my aunt. And as with them as little children, figured it out and got them ahead, was able to bring over her whole family from Puerto Rico practically.
Wow.
My mom was a young mother, and she was the first in her family to graduate high school and go to college. She figured it out. She got scholarships. Like, she was able to do it. And I looked at those women in my life, even my older sisters too, and I saw that um, they had so much smarts and so much drive and so much hard work. Like, they were really always willing to put in the work. It wasn't a lack of work ethic ever. It was a lack of perspective, a lack of access to information. And truly, I think it was them not seeing anybody that had started from little and had gotten to a lot within their circle. This is pre-internet, pre-social media, and they didn't have that perspective. And so for me, I wanted to be that person for my clients. Like, I wanted to be the person who could help them, once they figured out, hey, I've got a good job or I've got a business that's running, build wealth for themselves in a way that was going to be sustainable.
A side note with things, I want to talk to you more about kind of this wealth creation and preservation in a lot of ways. But I'm thinking as you're talking, and I'm thinking about like my upbringing too, most wealthy people, if they don't just inherit it, they oftentimes have this ingrained ability to like think about their cost, their expenses, like thinking about wealth in a different way because they see the pendulum swing. I didn't have any of it or barely any of it, like I did, and it sounded like you did too. And so it's like when I think of like the Great Depression where everybody saved every little thing, even if it was like trash, I didn't get to that extreme, but of like there's an element of this where you see like, hey, where are my roots and where I began, and then you have the upswing of success, and then you and I have young kids, and so I'm trying to think of how do you go about not only teaching your clients, but with your own kids, the preservation of wealth? Because I think there's like a few generations that maybe if they do have it, they lose it. Like talk to us a little bit about what you're doing practically at home to really kind of instill that preservation and that wealth mindset in your own kids.
So I think there's a perspective that we have to have where, my kids have never known struggle. Like, my husband and I have known struggle. We have struggled and have built everything literally from zero to where we are now. And I think that my kids have not lived that. And that's the whole point of why we work so hard. So I don't want to artificially create struggle for them that they don't necessarily have to. But what I always like to do is instill a sense of gratitude in them. And that is, that's part of our faith as well. Like, as a person of faith, having gratitude and understanding that not everybody has things as easy as they do. Luckily for my kids, our extended family is probably not doing as well as we are. And so they can see very clearly, especially when we go back home, they can see very clearly, like we go visit some auntie and there's no air conditioner and we're in a tropical climate and everybody's sweating to death because it's, 90 degrees and 100% humidity, right? Like they see it and they understand it. And so I think that also reinforces the feeling of gratitude and understanding that. But at the end of the day, my real focus with my clients and with my children is helping them understand there's a couple of things that you need to focus on always. One is, how much is your income? And, if you're lower income, then yes, increase your income. But there's so many people, which I'm sure you can appreciate as well, Nathan. I'm sure you see this in your business too, where, they just want to continue increasing their revenue and their business income because that's going to fix the problem within their business or in their personal life. That's going to fix the issues. And the challenge is, until we get to a point where we are very clear on our personal values and what our personal priorities are, and that is reflected in our personal spending, and we have a good handle on what our income is and what our outflows are, and we manage those and we balance all of those different things together, we're not going to be able, we're always just going to be on a hamster wheel. We're always just going to be chasing the dollar, chasing the next buck. And I've seen people with literal multiple seven figures of businesses that come to me as clients, and they, their personal finances are in shambles because they have not mastered that on both sides. And I think at the end of the day, it's about the habits, and it's about having a long view, and it's about having that perspective of what actually matters to you right now.
When you work with your clients, is it preservation? Is it growth? What is it primarily focused with?
I think it depends on the client. So most of my clients are younger, as I said. So, they're still in what advisors would call the accumulation phase, the growth phase, where they have a long time horizon and they can afford to take a good amount of risk and continue. And they should take a continued amount of risk to outpace inflation and grow their wealth. But there's a difference between, let's say, a client who has just sold a business and maybe does not have the next thing lined up. And so we're always going to balance, like that person, even if they're still young, their risk tolerance or their capacity to absorb risk may be a little bit different. And so we're going to have sort of buckets of preservation, of conservative, of protection for everybody, and that's going to vary, situation to situation. And then there's always going to be a growth portion of that, because once again, we need to make sure that that money is keeping up with inflation and allowing them to maintain their lifestyle.
Yeah. When you're talking with your clients, I totally agree with you. There's when you're building a plan, it's like custom to them because of their age and
Yeah.
their acumen and background and even the amount that they're trying to preserve and trying to build. What are some of the things that you teach that's a little bit different than others that kind of makes you stand out from
Yeah.
most?
So I think that most personal financial advice or personal financial content focuses on spending as little as possible. And while just like I said, it's important to spend less than you make. Like, that's always important. But I think that's too simplistic of a decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it makes people really miserable. And sometimes I think that can cause people to like go on binges and overdo it when they actually do spend money. I'm much more of a proponent of, yes, spend your money and enjoy your money. You work hard. You should have a portion of your income or a portion of your assets that you allow yourself to really just have fun, and you give yourself free reign. And this is about more being clear on what those things are. So for me personally, I like to travel. I travel a lot, and I like to take really good care of myself physically. So I'm going to get my hair done. I'm going to go to the spa. I'm going to have a nice gym membership. Like, those are my priorities, and for our family as well. So I'm going to make sure my kids are really well taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't spend a lot of money on other things, right? Like, I don't spend a lot of money on entertainment or, designer stuff, even though there's nothing wrong with that. But that's just not necessarily my priority. I keep my house costs pretty low because that's not as much of a priority to me.
Mm-hmm.
Car costs pretty low. That's not as much of a priority to me. But I give myself that free reign with that other portion of it. And so and I always tell my clients, have a percentage of your income direct deposited to an account every month. And whenever you want to spend it, like, whatever's in there is your limit. And instead of trying to maximize return and minimize lifestyle as your financial plan.
With everything that you do, there's the element of values that you talk about.
Yeah.
And I think like attracts like, right? So you work with a lot of women,
Yeah.
Talk about some of these things that you do, because I want to understand a little bit of how these got honed in at the very beginning from childhood, but then you have your own MBA from, school too. Like, how does that play a part into? Is this just from your selecting of clients, or talk
Yeah.
to us a little bit about that?
I think that my time in corporate, so I spent 9 years at, corporate wealth management firms, like large firms. And one of the things that I never felt very comfortable with was, it felt like the sole focus was on maximizing returns, on, you know, uh, saving money on taxes. Like, that was the be all end all. And I'm all for like having good return on investment and not paying Uncle Sam more than we need to. But I think when we are focused on that as the direction, then there's so much on the personal level that gets lost. And I didn't really quite understand what it was about the way that the business operated that I didn't like. But once I was on my own, I started to work with clients more and more. And they would share with me that, for example, they are an executive director of a nonprofit, and you know, they feel incongruent when their money is, funding things that they don't feel comfortable with. Okay. So,
Okay.
it was more, I kept getting similar messages from my clients. And then I recognized that this would actually be something that would be a really value add. And I think would, help my clients stay invested and feel really confident about their financial direction as well.
Let me ask you some tactical questions.
Yeah.
I have a lot of entrepreneur business owners,
Yeah.
here, and so they don't have the normal corporate, 401k,
Yeah.
sort of thing. What are some practical steps? And maybe we can chunk it down to like 3 different levels. You have someone that's beginning in their entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
someone that's like sort of hitting their stride, but not super ultra wealthy. And then someone
Yeah.
that's hitting their stride and they're like really starting to process, coming out of their shell now that they've been obsessed and focused with
Yeah.
like the day to day.
They've been
Now
in the
they have
grind.
some breathing room now to like, how can I expand my growth? Maybe if we looked at those 3 categories there, how would you
Yeah.
look at, some practical steps for people to do that?
I love that question. So for the beginning entrepreneur, I think, there's a lot of missteps that we make. We fall, we scrape our knees, we do things that don't necessarily work. But one of the things that I always tell folks that they should be very mindful of is protecting their profit margin and being very intentional about paying themselves and building a salary for themselves into their business. Because if the business is, what do they say? Revenue is for vanity and profit is for sanity, right? So I think a lot of times we're, focus on first 100K, 200K, 300K. That's great. We love that. But if you're not keeping most of it, then that, or not keeping a decent amount, then, and on a good growth path, on a solid growth path, then what you're doing is just setting yourself up to under earn for a really long time. And that's not great for your personal financial health. Once you have profit, you have the opportunity to reinvest in the business. You also have the opportunity to extract that profit as like retirement. I'm big about entrepreneurs investing in their retirement along the way and extracting cash flow from the business along the way, because I think that means that one, their profit margins are good if they're able to make retirement contributions. And then secondarily, if they're in the habit of that, if they want to sell the business in the future, they can show that buyer that they've been able to pay themselves a market wage and that they also have enough profit margin to do that. That's just receipts for them if they choose to go that path. For the middle tier that you said, like they've started to hit their stride, I think that's where they need to be really intentional about not succumbing to the CPAs, like let's minimize your taxes as the default. Because what I often find is someone will, let's say, have an LLC and they've made an S corp election and they may have multiple 6 figures, multiple 7 figures of revenue, but they're paying themselves 50 grand a year. And their personal finances are in shambles. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen that. It makes sense from a tax optimization standpoint because you're saving on self-employment taxes. But what it does is it starves that entrepreneur's personal finances. And the challenge with that is, in my opinion, if our personal finances are not in order, we are not going to make good decisions as CEOs of the business. What's going to happen is we're going to be in scarcity, we're going to be in lack, and being in that energy, we don't have to get super woo, but even just, you're probably going to overcorrect on things and you're probably going to panic when, you get an extra invoice that you weren't expecting or a client leaves you. And when you're in panic, you're not able to think clearly. So I think it's really, really important that you have what you're paying yourself, see the prior answer or listen to the prior answer about paying yourself a market salary, but also understand like, what are your personal financial goals that you want to hit? What is the timeline for those? And figure out between your salary, your profit distributions, retirement contributions that are being made, like reimbursements from your business or things that your business is funding for you, how all of those are going to happen. And make sure that the business is doing what it needs to. And I think when you have that number in mind of like, here's what I need to save, here's what I need to invest, I got to pay for my kids' college, and you know what those things are, then you're able to make better business decisions. Like if hey, I need to take out $200,000 for my business, just to throw out a number. I need to take out $200,000 for my business. I don't actually care. We'll figure out the different ways that that's going to come to me through those different measures that I mentioned before. But if you have $200,000 of profit, you're not going to go and hire somebody because oh, I need that 200. Like that's for me as the CEO. And when we can get to a place when we have a firm grasp on that number, then we can make better decisions. And I think that also, once again, like a business with a healthy profit margin is a more valuable business, period.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times like that mid 6 figures, low 7 figures, it feels like it should be really easy. Like there's lots of money coming in. There's lots of money coming in. There's lots of money coming in. But if you're not intentional about that, and that person is usually in the grind and they're so focused on the grind that they don't take the time to think about their personal numbers. And so that's one of the times where I tell folks to really be intentional about that. And then for the person that's already made it, I think it's about maintaining good cash flow and understanding what their financial independence number is, so that they can make a conscious decision about when they're going to stop grinding. And it may be that you want to build $100 million business and have an empire. That's great. But what I find sometimes is that entrepreneurs get addicted to the growth and the revenue growth, and the revenue grows because they have not done that work that I mentioned before of knowing what is enough for them on an annual basis and what is enough for them in terms of their net worth and in terms of their portfolio and what that's going to spit off for them, so that they can choose when they're going to stop, when maybe they're going to pivot and do something else and have another chapter, close that chapter on their life. And so that is really the focus for me. And then just preservation, like making sure you have your estate plan in place, making sure you have the right asset titling and asset protection. Like those are also really important to do at that point as well.
Yeah, I love that. Let me ask you what you've seen and what you apply to your life. People that are growth minded, that they're just focused on like building wealth, they have a unique quirk, drive, an obsession about like relentless growth. What have you seen with some of your clients that there's a different oddity almost, and many of them I've interviewed in this podcast because I love, that high performance drive of like obsession for growth. Talk about some of those qualities and characteristics that maybe you've seen not only in yourself but some other wealthy people that you've interacted with and helped.
I think that they're relentless about their direction and they're so clear on the direction that they're going. People who are aimless and don't necessarily have that clarity of vision, they're not going to get anywhere very far. And I think, the other thing I would say is they recognize that they're not an expert in everything. One of the things that I really value when I meet someone is it's incredible to be someone who has, some tangential knowledge of different things. Like I think as an entrepreneur, you have to know a lot of things. You have to know a little accounting, some sales, some marketing, some operations. Like you have to know all of these things together in order to make sure that things are moving in the right direction. But I think it's also really powerful when you recognize that's not my lane. And I need to have other people around that are smarter than me, that are going to teach me or help me move me in the right direction in that particular area. Like I feel I question anybody who says that they're doing really well in their business or financially that tells me they don't have a CPA or they don't have like a CFO, one or the other, that they, don't have a business coach, that they might not have, some support. Not necessarily that everybody needs an advisor, but like you don't have somebody helping you with your finances. Like all of these things together, I find that the people that are most successful have the professionals in their life, they have the team in their life so that they can, offload that mental load of thinking about those things and being the one that's driving things forward. And then they also recognize that they're going to be able to make better decisions and not have a lot of mistakes that they're going to have to correct later when they have the right folks around them. That's been my approach forever. Like I recognize I can't know everything. I'm really good at lots of things, but there are lots of things that I'm not great at. And, or I don't have the time and I don't want to make the time to be really good at them and to be super knowledgeable at them. So it's much better for me to save myself some time and have somebody who is much better and much more focused than I am on it.
Yeah, building teams are so important, like you're
Yeah.
saying. And so many times that I've seen people that don't build it is because they either hire C players or B players and then they throw up their hands and give up, or they don't want to like they don't know how to train people. And so there's a big dilemma with that release. But I agree, like there's specialists that you need to hire, put in place, especially with your wealth and the wealth growth. And then having key people around. I think that's so important. So thank you for adding that. But
My pleasure.
with some qualities of things I want to bring up too. Like you're obsessive, you and I, about health.
Yeah.
Talking about like our kids spending time. Talk about like the balance between, you got your business, you got your vision, you got your
Yeah.
goals, you got to spend time with your family, take care of your health, read books, learn things. Like, how do you look at balance?
Yeah. I look at balance as I have the things that really matter to me. Right now, the things that matter to me are my health, and that's mental, physical health, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's my spiritual health, right? Like those are
Yep.
really important to me. My relationships, my family, because I didn't have my parents together when I was young. And so I wanted, and my parents, were not like they got divorced. And all of that made me really want to have a healthy family life where we were like really connected and really well
Mm-hmm.
together. That's the next one. And my business too, because that's my personal purpose. And I look at my day and I think about how I spend my time and am I balancing between those three things? Not that they all need the same amount of time, because I probably spend, let's call it 2 hours a day on my physical health, spiritual health, the like. And then maybe 6 to 8 on work on any given day. And then the rest is my family. And I
Mm-hmm.
am ruthless about saying no. I don't go to things that don't fit into one of those, that don't further improve one of those. Um, I just don't, because it takes away. And I recognize that if I spend my time hanging out with random people that don't mean that much to me, or if I spend my time watching Netflix for 6 hours on a Saturday, that means that I'm not doing one of those other things. And so I am ruthless about saying no to things, have no issues with it. I'll say no to things all the time. I keep a pretty tight schedule. So, I have my calendar blocked, and, from five to seven is me time. That's my prayer time. That's my workout time. That's my reading time. That's for nourishing myself. 7 to 8 is mom time. I'm momming. I'm getting kids to school. I'm making them breakfast. I'm making sure everybody gets out the door. 8 to 4 is work, roughly. And then 4 on is I'm going to kids' basketball games. I'm taking them to gymnastics, and I'm cooking them dinner, and I'm helping with homework, and I'm really engaged with my family life. And that's how I've chosen to do that as well, because I know um, there's only so much time in a day. There's only so much energy in a day. And I really need to be mindful of how I do that and where I allocate that as well.
I love that. I think, talking with you has given me perspective of the most important things, and definitely building teams as a reminder for all of our listeners
For
to
sure.
scheduling, the priorities that you have. I remember a mentor of mine says, like, I can see where your priorities are by looking at your bank account and your calendar. And I
Facts.
think there's, this conversation that we have reminds me of that, because it's like, well, take a good audit and a good look of where you're at, kind of
Mhm.
identifying some key things, because even with those categories of wealth, we've also seen people on the extremes throughout history that have done the worst things. Like, you can look at Steve Jobs. He has all the wealth, but his family is in
Yeah.
tatters.
Yeah.
He the percentage of a lot of wealth that he's created with, Apple, he had a small amount of it at the very end. Like,
Hmm.
it's like, if we're looking at the right things, just try to prioritize as you're growing and building. Like, look at the essentials of what's real important, and then growth can happen when you're being intentional about that. And I think even if we look at the Bible of like you know, God's given us certain talents and gifts, and if we don't be good stewards of them, He's not going to give us more. So
Yeah.
I think there's some elements with that, and I appreciate you being on, the
Thank you.
podcast here, guys, and our listeners here for all of our future podcasts that we have. Continue to listen in. But Anna, how can people connect with you further? How can they find you and connect with
Yeah.
you, follow you, learn from you?
Yeah, so on social media, I'm mostly active on Instagram and LinkedIn, so you can find me there. My Instagram handle is at ANNANJIE KONTE. Um, my firm is called Bodead Wealth. That's PODER Wealth. And my podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's called the Financial Powerhouse Podcast. We have new episodes drop every Monday. And we just talk about wealth in terms of financial wealth, but also in terms of well being and mindset as well, for all of those women who want to be a lot more intentional about the direction of their life and want to make sure that money is a fuel for the life that they're trying to create and not an impediment.
Well, thank you so much. Guys, go check that out. It's going to be in the show notes, a link to her profile to connect with her further. I think she even has a webinar coming up too, if you're in the month of January, that you got to check that out. But again, if you're looking at building an audience and you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I build a coaching company? If you're a leader and you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I grow online in 2025 or beyond? Go check out that training. That's going to be super helpful. That's down linked in the description here as well. And again, thank you for tuning into the podcast, and we will see you on the next episode.